Hello and welcome. I'm Julie from ThermoKitchen, and today we're making hot cross buns, or Easter buns as they're otherwise known. So we're using the Thermomix, and this is the TM6. Now at the moment Cookadoo is showing on the screen, so we're going to tap the home button because we're going to be cooking in manual mode today. Okay, so we've got our 3 circles up, and our first step is to add our water. So we want to weigh the water into the machine. So we're sliding across to functions, tapping on the scales, and we are going to weigh in 200 mils or 200 grams of water. Wow, right on the dot. Okay, now we're adding our milk, and this is 70 grams of milk. So tap the tare button, bring it back to 0, and add in our milk. Next is our butter. Again, tare off, and we're weighing in 50 grams of butter. Tare it off again. And next comes our sugar, 70 grams of sugar. Now I'm going to avoid the blades when I do this, so that it doesn't all stick to the blades. And now we have our yeast. So this is 2 teaspoons of yeast, dried yeast. Now yeast is a living organism, and for this reason we are going to be adding it to a warm environment so that it wakes it up. Now I'm just going to pop this in and I'll talk to you more about that. Again, we're avoiding the blades, so we want the yeast to go into the milk and water. And popping the lid on, we're going to X out of this scale function and tap our home button again so that we can combine this. So we're putting this on for 3 minutes. And we're heating the mixture to 40 degrees. And then the blade speed is just speed 2. Okay, so now I want to explain a few things to you. So what we're doing here is we're waking the yeast up. So we've got it in a nice warm bath of water and milk. We're making sure that the mixture is at about 40 degrees. We don't want to go over 40 degrees because heat can kill the yeast. And we've added the sugar because yeast consumes the sugar, and that's actually its first meal, so it livens it all up and it gets it ready to work for our dough. Now, another thing about yeast, I'm asked quite a lot, how do you know if yeast is active or not? Now, the best way to know if the yeast that you've got in your pantry is still active is just add a teaspoon of yeast to just a container of warm water, stir it around, and then just leave it in a warm environment. Now, after about 10 to 15 minutes or so, if you can see frothy little bubbles, then the yeast is active. So it's woken up and it's ready to do its thing. So then you know that that yeast is going to be suitable to make your baked goods. Now, I do know that a lot of people get a little bit nervous when they're making either breads or rolls or even hot cross buns. But once you understand the principles of yeast mainly, and flour and gluten, you'll be able to make any baked goods successfully. So this is a great recipe to try because it is really, really easy, and the feeling of success when you've baked your own Easter buns is pretty terrific. Okay, and there we go. So that's all mixed around, and hopefully our yeast is waking up and getting ready to do its thing. So now we're adding our dry ingredients. So here I've got some baker's flour. Now I'm just going to slide across again to our scales, tap on the scales button, and I'm weighing in 500 grams of flour. Oh, sorry, that's 560 grams of flour. And that is actually correct, I'm sorry. 560 grams of flour is actually what we're adding to the recipe. Now we are adding our salt. Now the reason the salt goes in after the flour is we really do want to separate the salt from the yeast to start off with. So if we had have added our 1 teaspoon of salt to the liquid, then there would have been a concentration of salt actually in there, and that wouldn't have done the yeast any good, especially since we're still in this stage of actually trying to wake up the yeast. So we've added that flour layer so that we can separate that, and the salt goes in next. Adding our bread improver, dear oh dear, adding our bread improver, which gives the texture of the loaf, makes the texture really nice. We're adding our nutmeg and cinnamon. Okay, so the next step is just to combine those ingredients. So lid on, out of our scales, tapping our home button to come back to our manual mode. And we are just going to put 40 seconds on the timer. And speed 3. Okay, so that's just going to combine all the ingredients ready for our knead function. Very good. I'll just give you a look before we put our knead function on. Now, if necessary, you can scrape down the bowl, but this doesn't have anything that needs scraping down, so it's all good. We are going to slide across, tap on the wheat symbol, and put 2 minutes on the clock. Tap on the wheat symbol again, and just turn it 1 click. Okay, so kneading is a very important part of making dough. So what we're actually doing when we're kneading is activating the gluten, and it's the gluten that gives the bread its structure. So in cakes, when we're making cakes with flour, we're actually just folding the flour in because we don't want to activate the gluten. When we're making dough, we want the gluten to be activated so it's nice and strong. So then when our yeast pushes the dough up during the proofing process, the bubbles don't come out. The bubbles are trapped by the activated gluten. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, lovely. So this is shiny now, and when I'm pushing it around, you can see that it's got structure. It's bouncing back, it's not sticking to me, and we can stretch it without it breaking. Okay, so next job is to add our sultanas. So we are tapping on the home button and sliding across to our functions. Tapping on the scales, and I'm adding 200 grams of sultanas. Okay, there we go. Now we're Xing out of that. And we're going back to our knead function because we want to incorporate those sultanas. Now the sultanas won't get completely incorporated, but we can do that by hand as well. Just going to give it a little bit of a go. Now I've got the spatula here because in between each of the dough cycles, I'm just going to give it a little bit of help to incorporate the sultanas. So this is just on for 30 seconds. The timer says 30 seconds. We tap our dough and just move it 1 notch. Okay, let's take a look. Very good. Okay, so here's our dough with our sultanas. Most of them are incorporated, but there's some that aren't, but that's not a problem. Okay, I'm just going to pop some oil on my hands and a little bit more probably in the thermoserver. Now I'm going to be proofing in a thermoserver today. You can proof in a thermomat, but this is what I'm using today. So here's our dough. Awesome. So it's all nice and shiny. which is what you expect once you've activated the gluten. Just going to pop this in here. Now we do have sultanas and dough left in the bottom, and that's fine. We are just going to add it all in together and then leave this to proof. We will worry about making sure that all the sultanas are incorporated after we've done our proofing. Very good. Okay, so what does proofing do? We've woken up our yeast, and we've given it a warm environment, we've fed it. Now what we're waiting for is for the activity to start happening, for the bubbles to start forming, and for our dough to actually start to rise. So proofing is just a fancy way of saying that we're leaving it to rise. And a lot of people will ask me how long they should proof their dough for. There is no right answer to that because it's not a time thing. Yeast likes a warm environment, which means that if you are in a warm environment, your house is really hot, it's in the middle of summer, it's not going to take very long to proof. Whereas if we're making something in winter and we can't warm the area, then it might take all day to proof. So the best answer to that is we need to give the yeast time to do what it needs to do. So in this bowl, it's actually taking up quite a lot of space in this bowl because it's only a small thermoserver. So I would be expecting that we will be at about this size before this yeast is fully proofed. So basically we're wanting to double the size of the dough. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put this somewhere nice and warm, and I'll come back to you and show you what it looks like when it's actually reached the right stage to move on to forming our buns. Okay, we are back, and let's go and see how our dough has proofed. I'm just going to grab it, and look at this. So it has risen nicely. It has definitely doubled, so we are ready for the next step. Okay, just going to put some oil on my hands so the dough doesn't stick to my hands, and a bit of oil on the bench. Okay, whoops, there goes the sultana. Smells good. Okay, I'm not going to muck around with this too much. I am just going to divide it into our bread rolls. So that looks about half. So we need 6 out of this and 6 out of the other half. So I'm just going to divide that into thirds and this one into thirds as well. Hopefully this will turn out roughly even. Looking very good. Okay, so we've got 6 there, and we're going to go again one more so we get our 12 rolls. Nice. And they look basically even. If there was any that you thought looked a little bit light on, just kind of adjust that. Okay, so now we are going to shape our rolls. So you notice a few of the sultanas are falling out. It doesn't matter at all. And I like to fold the ends in under as I'm doing this so that any of the joins are on the bottom. And that means that we are going to have a nice flat surface for our hot cross bun. So I've got this here. Now I've lined a roasting tray. It's a high-sided roasting tray. And I think this is 33 centimeters. Let me have a look. Yeah, it's a 33 centimeter roasting pan. Okay, this one's already looking pretty nice. I might just turn those bits down, and when I put it on the baking tray, it'll go down like that. So we're going 3 across and 4 down. So again, I'm just working that around so that all the joins are in the bottom and sitting it on here. Next one, this one's a bit skewy, so we might flatten this one out a bit and then tuck him under so that we get a nice smooth top. And it will become important as it cooks, because if we leave the splits on the top, they will open up as you cook and it won't be as pretty. So far they seem to be roughly the same size. And believe me, not exactly the same size, just roughly the same size. If you wanted to be more precise, you could always use your Thermomix and weigh each of the dough balls. Like weigh the total dough ball and then divide it by 12 and weigh each of the dough balls so that your rolls are exactly the same size. I think you know me by now. I am not that kind of person. You want to try and get a lot of the sultanas actually hidden if you can, because we don't want them to burn as the rolls are cooking. Okay, so we want them evenly spaced. So what I'm going to do now is just tidy them up a bit so that they will rise and push into each other in a uniform manner. Now this first one I did, it's not looking as nice as the others. It doesn't have such a flat top. So I'm actually going to redo this one, because really at this stage, what it looks like makes a big difference to the finished product. So I'm just going to roll that one in on itself a bit more so that we get a nice shiny top with no cracks. Okay, and pop that one back into position. All right. Okay, so here are our 12 buns. Now we need to leave these to proof again. Now this is the most important step, because basically you do not want to bake these until they have grown to their full potential. So basically, if we were to bake these off now, you would get buns about this size. They don't really expand in the oven. Whereas if we wait until they're really nice and puffy, that's what's going to come out of the oven. So if they don't look magic going in, they're not going to look magic going out. So now we're going to put this into a warm spot and allow them time to proof. So I do like to cover this with a tea towel because if this dries out, it also doesn't look very good as they start to expand. So we don't want it to get a dry top. So cover it with a tea towel, put it somewhere warm, and once they look like they're ready to bake, I'll give you another look and we'll go from there. Okay, so our hot cross buns have almost finished proofing. So the next step is to make the cross. So I've got the TM6 here, it's on cookadoo, so I'm going to tap the home button and we're going to slide across to our scales. Now the cross is just a flour and water paste. So I'm just going to grab a jug. I'm going to tear that off to 0. Now we've got 80 grams of flour that I'm just going to pop in here. Okay, 83, that's all right. And now we want the same amount of water. So I've got water in this jug and I'm just going to measure in until we get to 80 grams of water. Yep, 83. Wow. Very good. So I'm going to go get a spoon. Let's choose a different spoon. And we're just going to combine this by hand. We're just making a paste that's going to be a pipeable consistency. So just stirring around, getting lumps out. I'm not doing this in the Thermomix because there's really no point in dirtying the bowl when it's a simple process of just stirring it with a teaspoon. Okay, so there's no lumps. Well, not too many lumps left in that, so that's good. And we're going to put this in a piping bag. Okay. So to make things easy on myself, I've got a cup, got my mix shop piping bags. I'm not going to worry about using a tip for this because we're just doing a straight cross, so it's nothing fancy. Now if I use this cup to pop over here, then I can add it quite easily without making too much of a mess into the piping bag. Don't think I'm going to need the rest of that, but that's okay. Pop that in there. I do want to get out any air bubbles because we want a nice flow when we're making our cross. Okay, and just by doing this, I'm forcing it down to the base. Okay, so that's ready to go. Okay, so here are our proofed hot cross buns. Now you will see some of them look gorgeous and some of them don't look quite as pretty. So this one here, obviously it's all chock-a-block full of sultanas, so it hasn't proofed as well as the other ones. It'll be nice, it'll taste nice, it'll taste very sultanery. But the rest have proofed nicely. And they're a little bit of an odd size, but some are large, some are small. But again, it's really not going to matter. If you did want it to be perfect, you can weigh the dough, like I said before. So we're just going to cut the top off the piping bag. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pipe straight lines and then turn around and go the other way so that it's nice and neat. I'm sure there's pastry chefs everywhere cringing. Okay, so there we go. We've got our cross on the buns and it's just a matter of baking that now. So I'm going to pop this in the oven and we will prepare our glaze. We want to put the glaze on as soon as it comes out of the oven. Oh wow, that smells like a bakery. It smells absolutely delicious. They're almost cooked, so we are going to make our glaze. So this is what makes our buns all nice and shiny, just like as if you had have bought them at a bakery. So we are going to press on the manual button, pop our jug on so that we can weigh our sugar and water. So tap the scales and we have 40 grams of white sugar. Yep. And now this is actually hot water. I'm putting in 40 grams of hot water and I'll tell you why in just a second. It takes a lot of concentration to get 40 grams. Okay, so here's our sugar and water and it's going to make our glaze. Now I'm just going to stir it and let that sugar dissolve. Now again, we could have done that in the Thermomix, but we would have been cleaning our bowl too often and it's just a matter of stirring to dissolve the sugar. Now my tap water is extremely hot, So I have no worries about this dissolving on its own while we wait for the bread rolls to cook, the hot cross buns to cook. But if you do have any grainy bits left, just pop it in the microwave for a couple of seconds and that will fully dissolve for you. Okay, so let's take a look at our hot cross buns. Smells amazing. Okay, and here we go. Perfectly baked hot cross buns. And you can see my little one that has obviously got a lot of sultanas in it. It hasn't quite puffed up the way the rest have. And now while this is hot, we want to put our hot sugar glaze on it. So we're just going to brush over nicely, and straight away they start to get that store-bought look, but nice and shiny. So by putting a hot glaze onto the hot bread, it dries out and becomes really sticky and yummy. Beautiful. Okay. Well, there we have it. Homemade hot cross buns. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to join me on our ThermoKitchen Facebook group. Happy cooking!